Whose chair are you sitting in? My stepmother hissed, right before her hand slammed onto my shoulder during Thanksgiving dinner. The room went silent. My grandfather, the richest man in town, slowly took off his gold family ring, placing it on the tablecloth like a verdict. Someone snickered. Someone started recording, and I smiled, because for the past 9 months, I had prepared for this exact moment. My name is Evelyn Hart. I am 33 years old, and I live in Fort Collins, Colorado. My life there is structured, predictable, and clean. I am a fraud auditor for a firm called Northwind Analytics. My job is to look at a company's perfect, pristine public image and find the rot underneath. I follow the money. I trace the decimal points that were deliberately misplaced. I find the lies people tell, first to their investors, and then, inevitably, to themselves. I am, by all professional accounts, exceptionally good at my job. It's a skill my family taught me. Today, I am not in Fort Collins. I am driving south, into the suburbs of Loveland, to my father's house. The drive is barely 30 minutes, but it always feels like a descent. The air gets thicker, the expectations heavier. It is Thanksgiving. This house, a sprawling, new-build ranch that screams aspirational, is not my home. It has not been my home for a very long time. It is Lorraine's house. She just lets my father pay the mortgage. I park my gray, sensible sedan behind a gleaming white Escalade that I know, from a cursory public record search last month, belongs to my stepbrother, Chase. It has a vanity plate. Of course it does. I sit in the quiet of my car for 1 full minute, listening to the engine tick. The front door is a cheerful, festive red, a gaping mouth waiting to swallow me. I can already hear the low thrum of the television. A football game, always, and the high, brittle peal of laughter from an aunt who finds everything hilarious. It's the sound of forced cheer, a frequency that sets my teeth on edge. On the passenger seat sits my purse. It's leather, black, and unremarkable, tucked inside. Next to a high-powered portable charger and a bottle of migraine pills is a thin, deceptively light manila folder. It contains 9 months of my life, 9 months of cross-referencing, sleepless nights, and quiet, methodical data aggregation. It is a masterpiece of forensic accounting, and it weighs, in my mind, about 1,000 pounds. I check my reflection in the rearview mirror, face neutral, eyes clear. I am not here as a daughter. I am not here as a sister. I am here as an auditor. My mantra, the one I've repeated every morning for the last week, comes to my lips. Today, you do not argue. Today, you just unlock. I get out of the car. The November air is sharp. The sky a piercing, high-altitude blue. The cold feels good. It feels clean. The festive red door swings open before I can even lift my hand to knock. Evelyn, you made it. Lorraine Keaton, my stepmother. She stands framed in the doorway, a vision in beige cashmere and expensive, distressed denim. Her blonde hair is perfect. Her teeth are aggressively white, and her smile is a masterpiece of social engineering. It is wide, welcoming, and utterly devoid of warmth. It does not, and has never, reached her eyes. We were so worried you'd be tied up with work, she coos, stepping aside. You know how you get, always so busy. Hello, Lorraine, happy Thanksgiving. I step over the threshold. The house smells of sage, roasting poultry, and Lorraine's perfume, something heavy and floral that seems to coat every surface. The heat is stifling. My father, I know, likes the house cooler, but this is Lorraine's production. She controls the thermostat just as she controls everything else. The living room is packed. Aunts, uncles, cousins, and a few people I don't recognize, friends of Lorraine's, probably, invited to serve as a buffer audience. And in the center of it all, the dining room. This is Lorraine's stage. She is a meticulous director, and her favorite production is the seating arrangement. The long, polished mahogany table is set for at least 20. It's a battlefield disguised as a feast, and your placement at the table is a direct, real-time reflection of your current standing in Lorraine's estimation. She doesn't use place cards. That would be too overt. She guides. She orchestrates. Mary, honey, why don't you sit down here? I hear her call to an aunt. You'll be closer to the wine. And Janet, you're next to Mary. The head of the table is for my father, a purely symbolic position. The true power, as everyone knows, is in the two chairs flanking him. One is for Lorraine, the conductor. The other, the seat of honor, is reserved for the family member currently highest in her favor. It's a prize, and the competition for it is silent, pathetic, and vicious. The head of the table, I once heard her explain to a fawning friend, is for the people who really belong to this new chapter of our family, the people who contribute to the positive energy. Her eyes, in that moment, had flicked to me. I am the ghost of the previous chapter. I am the walking, talking, breathing line item of my father's past, a past she is determined to scrub, rewrite, and replace. I am not positive energy. I see him, my stepbrother, Chase Keaton. He's slouched in an armchair, holding court with his latest girlfriend, a young woman with wide, nervous eyes. Chase is 24, but he carries the entitled swagger of a medieval princeling. He is Lorraine's son, and he has never, in his entire life, been told no and had it stick. As I pass, I catch a fragment of his whisper. He's leaning in close to the girlfriend, a smirk playing on his lips. And then, for the grand finale, he murmurs, just loud enough for me to hear, I've got a little surprise gift for my big sis. His eyes cut to me, glittering with a cheap, nasty malice. The girlfriend giggles, a high, tinkling sound that makes me want to check my balance sheet. I am the big sis. The last gift he gave me was a panicked phone call at 2 a.m. from a holding cell, needing me to fix a misunderstanding about a credit card that just happened to have my father's name on it. I ignore him. I am not here for him. My gaze sweeps the crowded, overheated room, searching for the only other person in this house who operates in reality. He's in the corner, near the fireplace, standing apart from the chattering groups. Arthur Vale, my maternal grandfather. At 82, Arthur is a monolith. He's a retired real estate investor who, unlike my father, built his own empire from nothing but grit and an uncanny ability to see 3 steps ahead of everyone else. He is, as Lorraine is so fond of telling her friends, the richest man in town. He is also the quietest. He stands in his simple tweed jacket, nursing a small glass of whiskey, and he watches. He misses nothing. On the ring finger of his right hand, he wears the ring. It is not a flashy piece of jewelry. It is a heavy, solid gold signet ring, worn smooth with time, bearing the Vale family crest, an oak tree rooted above a skeleton key. That ring is not an accessory. It is a legal instrument. In the complex, ironclad documents of the Vale Family Trust, documents I have studied until I can recite them from memory. The ring is referred to as the living key. It is the physical symbol of his active, unimpaired control over the entire trust. Its presence on his hand means all is as it should be. Its removal, that is a different matter entirely. Our eyes meet across the room. He gives me one slow, deliberate nod. It is not a welcome. It is not a hello. It is an acknowledgement. The board is set. The pieces are in play. Dinner! Dinner! Everyone! Lorraine claps her hands, a sharp, arresting sound, like a gavel. Everyone, find your places. Please, find your places. The predictable, lemming-like shuffle begins. The family moves toward the dining room, a tide of beige and competing perfumes. I let the main surge pass, falling in at the rear. I move toward the table, my purse clutched in my hand. My father is already seated at the head, looking flushed and stressed. He's talking to an uncle about football. Lorraine takes her seat at the opposite end, the working end, from which she can direct the flow of food and conversation. The chair to my father's right, the seat of honor, is conspicuously empty. Lorraine has been saving it. Chase, predictably, steers his girlfriend to the seat next to his mother. The various aunts and uncles and cousins fill in the middle, a noisy buffer zone. I keep walking. There are 2 empty seats left. One is at the far, desolate end, next to a cousin who I know will complain about the dryness of the turkey. The other is the seat of honor. Lorraine is momentarily distracted, laughing loudly at something an uncle said. She hasn't guided me yet. She hasn't had the chance to publicly banish me to the far end. This is the moment, not to argue, to unlock. I walk the full length of the table, past the gravy boats and the mashed potatoes. My father looks up as I approach. He smiles, a weak, nervous expression. "Evelyn, hello, dear." "Father," I say. I do not turn toward the empty chair at the far end. I stop next to him. I place my purse on the floor by my feet, pull out the heavy oak chair to his right, and sit down. The effect is instantaneous. It is as if I have pulled a fire alarm. The scraping of silverware stops. All conversation dies, mid-sentence. Even the football game in the other room seems to go silent. Across the table, I see the color drain from Lorraine's face. Her hostess smile, which had been plastered on, simply collapses. She looks, for 1 second, completely and totally stunned. Then the color rushes back, a hot, blotchy, furious red that starts at her throat and climbs to her hairline. She stands up. Her chair scrapes backward. She begins to walk toward me, her steps short and sharp on the hardwood floor. She is not the gracious hostess now. She is a predator. "Evelyn," she says. Her voice is not a coo. It is a low, dangerous hiss. I meet her gaze. "Lorraine." I calmly pick up the heavy linen napkin from my plate and begin to unfold it. "Whose chair?" she grits out. "Are you sitting in?" I pause, the napkin halfway to my lap. I look at her, my expression one of mild inquiry. "I wasn't aware the chairs had owners. Lorraine, is this one yours?" That's what breaks her. The politeness, the calm, the utter refusal to engage in her reality. Her hand comes up. It's fast. She doesn't slap my face. That would be too obvious. Too common. She does something far more humiliating. She slams her open palm, hard, onto my shoulder, digging her fingers in, like she's trying to brand me. "Get up!" she screams. The word is a raw, ugly tear in the fabric of the evening. The force of the blow is stunning. It's not just a push. It's an assault. My body jolts, my arm flails, and my hand connects with the tall, full glass of red wine next to my plate. Time slows. The glass tips, a graceful, terrible arc. Deep, dark Cabernet, a wine I know my father saves for special occasions, spills across the pristine, white Irish linen tablecloth. It spreads, a spider web of accusation, a blooming, arterial stain. "Now look what you've done," she shrieks. She grabs the back of my heavy oak chair with both hands and yanks it backward, violently. The chair legs screech against the floor. I'm thrown off balance, stumbling as I try to get my feet under me. The room is in collective shock. My father is staring, mouth open, not at me, not at his wife, but at the spreading stain on his tablecloth. Then the other sounds. A snicker, sharp and ugly. I look. It's Chase. He's holding his phone up, not even pretending not to record. His girlfriend is beside him, hand over her mouth, her eyes wide with a kind of horrified, giddy delight. Good. I think, my mind clicking back into place. Document the assault, establish the witnesses. Perfect. And then, another sound. Click. It is not a loud sound. It is small, metallic, and precise. But in the suffocating silence of the room, it sounds like a gunshot. Every head, including Lorraine's, swivels. My grandfather, Arthur Vale, has not moved from his corner by the fireplace. He is still standing, watching. His whiskey glass is on the mantel. His hands are in front of him. Slowly, with a deliberation that seems to suck all the air from the room. He is twisting the heavy gold signet ring on his right hand. He works it over the knuckle. His movements unhurried, almost casual. He holds the ring in his palm for a beat. Then, he walks to the end of the dining table, the one furthest from the chaos, and he places the ring on the white tablecloth, next to his empty plate. He doesn't toss it. He doesn't slide it. He sets it down with the finality of a judge laying down a gavel. Lorraine, high on adrenaline and petty rage, has no idea what she is seeing. She thinks it's part of her drama. "See?" she cries, her voice trembling. "See? Even Arthur is disgusted with you. You ruin everything you touch." My grandfather says nothing. He simply looks past Lorraine, past my father, past the spilled wine, and his eyes lock onto mine. There is no anger in his expression, no pity, just confirmation. It is the signal, the break glass in case of emergency signal we had established 9 months ago. The key has been turned, the lock is open. A cousin, one of Lorraine's side, decides this is his moment. She does this every year. She can't stand not being the center of attention. Honestly, I think we should take a vote. I vote Evelyn isn't invited to family gatherings anymore. Not until she learns some damn respect. "I second that," Chase calls out, raising his own glass, his phone still recording. "All in favor of banning the Ice Queen?" A few timid hands go up. An aunt, a cousin. It is the most ludicrous, pathetic, high school cafeteria moment I have ever witnessed, and it is exactly the last piece I needed. Public humiliation. Check. Lorraine is breathing hard, trying to smooth down her cashmere, trying to reclaim her role as the victimized hostess. "Well, Evelyn, are you going to apologize for this mess?" She gestures at the wine, at the chair, at me. I stand up straight. I pull the chair, which is still askew, and push it neatly back into its place at the table. I look at the spilled wine. I look at the ring, gleaming gold against the white linen at the far end of the table. Then I look at Lorraine, and I smile. It is not a kind smile. It is not a forgiving smile. It is the small, tight, focused smile of a professional who has just found the unfixable error in the books, the gotcha smile. I reach down to my purse, which is still on the floor. My fingers brush against the manila folder, but I bypass it. Not yet. I pull out my small silver digital voice recorder. I press the record button. A small, discreet red light blinks to life. I place the recorder on the table, next to the wine stain. Then, I hold out my other hand, palm up, toward the stunned, silent room. "The performance is over," I say. My voice is not loud, but it is calm, clear, and it cuts through the humidity of the room like a shard of ice. Time for the ledger. That red light on the recorder pulsed, a tiny, synthetic heartbeat in the stunned silence. It was not just recording the present, it was validating the past. This was not my first ledger. The first one began when I was 14. My mother's illness was not a poetic fading. It was a brutal, bureaucratic nightmare of infections, complications, and secondary surgeries. It was the smell of antiseptic and terror. My father, a man I had always considered capable, simply broke. He dissolved, paralyzed by a grief so profound it rendered him useless. He would sit at the kitchen table for hours, staring at the cheerful fruit-patterned wallpaper, while the world outside continued to demand things. The mail piled up, pink envelopes, yellow envelopes, envelopes with menacing clear windows. I was 14 years old, and I started opening them. I became the administrator of our family's collapse. I learned how to read a utility bill. I learned the difference between a final notice and a warning. I learned how to talk to a creditor on the phone, pitching my voice low, pretending to be my mother's sister. I learned how to portion a pound of ground beef to last 3 meals, how to pay the electric bill by sacrificing the cable, how to siphon gasoline from the lawnmower to get my father's car to the hospital. I learned, at 14, that love was not a feeling, it was a function. It was triage. Love was absorbing the household's pain, managing the ledgers, and shielding my father from the consequences of his own paralysis. Love was doing everything, silently, so the broken machine could keep humming. when my mother finally died. The silence in the house became a physical weight. 2 years later, my father, desperate for any noise that was not grief, found Lorraine. Lorraine was not quiet. She was a whirlwind of beige cashmere, loud opinions, and the cloying scent of gardenias, and she came with a son, Chase, my father, craving the noise of a new, functioning life, clung to her. A new rule was established in the house, a rule that superseded all others. It was Lorraine's favorite phrase: "We must keep the peace." Keeping the peace was a euphemism. It meant, do not upset Lorraine. It meant, do not mention the past. It meant, do not challenge the new narrative. And most importantly, it meant, do not question Chase. Chase was a human-shaped black hole for resources. He was 16 when he moved in, and he already possessed the entitled swagger of a man who had never faced a consequence. He didn't just spend money. He incinerated it. It started small. He borrowed my laptop for school, and suddenly I had hundreds of dollars in charges for games and apps I had never downloaded. Weird, he'd smirk. Must have synced by accident. Sis, he borrowed my father's credit cards for gas and racked up charges for clothes and sound systems. He was sloppy, arrogant, and protected. Every time I tried to point out the discrepancies, Lorraine would sweep in, her voice dripping with disappointed sympathy. "Evelyn, please, don't be petty. We're a family now. We don't keep score." When I left for college, I did not choose a passion. I chose a weapon. I chose forensic accounting. I chose it because people lie, parents lie, stepmothers lie, brothers lie, but numbers do not know how. A balance sheet either balances or it does not. A transaction is either documented or it is not. There is no nuance in a decimal point. It is either correct or it is fraud. I found a profound, unshakable comfort in that binary. I built a life in Fort Collins around that certainty. I was good at my job. I was safe. I thought the distance would protect me. I was wrong. Distance just made the emergencies more expensive. I was 25, just starting at Northwind Analytics, when the first big call came. It was my father. The lingering medical debts from my mother's illness, the ones I thought had been settled, had not been. The interest had compounded. A lien was about to be placed on the house, Lorraine's house. "We just need a little help to get over the hump. Evelyn," my father pleaded, his voice thin and reedy. "Just to clear this old mess." I drained my savings, over $30,000, the money I had been meticulously setting aside for a down payment on my own condo. I wired it. I told myself it was the last tie to my mother. It was closure. 2 years later, it was the roof, a freak hailstorm that insurance somehow wouldn't cover. Lorraine called this time. "Evelyn, honey, you're just so good with money, and we're in such a bind. Your father is beside himself." I co-signed the loan, which, I soon learned, meant I was the only one making the payments. Then it was the HVAC system. Then it was Chase. Chase was a constant, low-grade fever that spiked into a full-blown crisis every 18 months, 3 times between the ages of 28 and 32. I got the call, not from Chase, never from him. It was always Lorraine, her voice a theatrical performance of maternal hysteria. He hadn't just maxed out a credit card, he'd gotten tangled with a predatory lender. He'd borrowed from the wrong person. He was in trouble. "He could go to jail. Evelyn," she would sob. "It will ruin his future. He's just a boy. He made a silly mistake." The silly mistakes cost me, in total, another $40,000. The third time, after the final wire transfer, I drove down to Loveland. I was 32. I was tired. I sat at that same polished mahogany dining table. I didn't bring emotion. I brought spreadsheets. "Here is a summary of the loans," I said, my voice as flat and neutral as the paper I slid across the table. "I've included the transfers for the house and the 3 payments for Chase. I am not asking for it all at once, but we need to agree on a repayment structure." Lorraine looked at the spreadsheet as if it were a dead insect. She didn't look at the numbers. She looked at me, and she laughed. It was a high, tinkling sound, completely devoid of humor. "Evelyn, honey, what on earth is this?" "It's the money I've paid on your behalf," I said. "Oh, loans?" she scoffed, pushing the paper back toward me. "We don't use that word. This is family. Evelyn, family is about forgiveness. It's about supporting each other, not keeping score. I'm honestly embarrassed for you. It's so cold. I paid for the roof over your head. Lorraine, I paid off Chase's gambling debt. That isn't keeping score. It's a fact." Her face hardened. The mask of the wounded mother dropped, revealing the cold calculation beneath. "Your father is so disappointed when you get like this. All this negativity. We just want to move forward. Why must you always be dragging us back into the mud?" I left with my useless spreadsheets. I drove straight to my grandfather's house. Arthur Vale lived in the old part of town, in the stone house my grandmother had loved. He was on the porch, reading a physical newspaper. He poured me a glass of iced tea, and he listened. He listened to the entire, pathetic, 32-year history without saying a single word. He did not offer sympathy. He did not rage on my behalf. When I was finally finished, the silence stretching between us, he folded his newspaper. He looked at me over the rim of his glasses. "Did you keep the receipts?" The question was so simple, so practical. It completely disarmed me. "What?" "The receipts," he repeated. "The wire transfer confirmations, the loan documents you co-signed, the canceled checks. Did you keep them?" Yes, I think so. Most of them. They're in a file. For taxes." "Good," he nodded. A single, sharp motion. "From now on, you keep everything, every text message, every email, every voicemail. You get a portable voice recorder, a good one. You pay for things with a credit card. Never cash, never a debit. You create a paper trail. You log every call." He leaned forward, his eyes intense. "A family that demands forgiveness without repentance. Evelyn is just a business partnership in default, and you are their unsecured creditor. It's time to start behaving like one." That was the day the daughter died. That was the day the auditor took over. I bought the best pocket recorder on the market. I opened a new dedicated cloud storage account, triple encrypted. I spent a weekend scanning every document, every bank statement, every panicked "please help" text from Chase. I transcribed every voicemail from Lorraine. I created a new set of ledgers, not for them, for me. For 9 months, I dug, and the deeper I dug, the clearer it became. This wasn't just dysfunction. This was a pattern. If they were willing to defraud me, who else were they defrauding? That's when I found the charity. Lorraine loved to be seen as a pillar of the community. Her pet project was the Loveland Winter Heating Fund, a small co-op that helped low-income families and seniors pay their gas bills. She was the treasurer. Her picture was in the Loveland Reporter Herald every December, smiling, handing over a comically large check. It took me less than 1 hour, using the publicly available 990 forms, to find the hole. The donations were robust. The payouts were not. There was a significant bleeding gap, a shortage. Administrative fees, listed as consulting and community outreach, were eating up nearly 40% of the donations, and those fees were paid out in checks, always just under the $10,000 reporting threshold, to a single vendor. Keaton Consulting, an LLC I had never heard of, registered to Lorraine's P.O. box. It was sloppy. It was arrogant. It was, in all likelihood, criminal. I marked it with a red star. But the money wasn't just sitting in her LLC, it was moving. That's when I found his name, buried in the incorporation documents for a different shell company, Damon West. Damon West, a flashy small-time boutique developer with a predatory smile and a portfolio of questionable mixed-use projects. He had no official ties to my family, but his name appeared as a consultant on a PR firm that was also, coincidentally, doing pro bono work for Lorraine's heating fund. And Damon West's primary venture, Frontier Holdings LLC, was quietly, aggressively, trying to buy up land parcels just outside of town. Land parcels I recognized, parcels that belonged to my grandfather. Lorraine wasn't just stealing from the poor. She wasn't just stealing from me. She was partnered with an outsider. They were making a play. My family was not just a dysfunctional unit, it was a criminal enterprise, and I, Evelyn Hart, was the auditor who had just found the rot. I closed that file, saved it, and began to prepare for Thanksgiving. The call came 2 weeks before Thanksgiving. It was my father, but the voice was Lorraine's, co-opting his phone and his authority. "Evelyn, darling, we're having a little family pre-meeting on Sunday. Just us. We have something wonderful to share." Just us was code. It meant me, my father, Lorraine, and Chase. It meant I was about to be cornered. It meant they needed something. I drove down on that Sunday, my pocket recorder already active before I left the car. I walked into the same stiflingly hot living room, but this time, there was no pretense of a party. It was a corporate ambush dressed in weekend casual. They were all seated, my father, in his armchair, looking like a hostage. Lorraine and Chase were on her pristine beige sofa, a united front, on the coffee table, a stack of glossy, professionally printed brochures. "Evelyn." "Perfect," Lorraine smiled, gesturing to the single, hardback chair they had placed opposite them, the interrogation seat. "Sit, sit. We have the most exciting news." Chase, vibrating with a smug, unearned confidence, leaned forward and grabbed a brochure. "It's time, sis. We're finally doing it." He slid the brochure across the table. The cover was a soft focus photo of a rustic barn. The text, in an elegant, flowing script, read, "The Keaton Collective." "The what?" I asked, not touching it. "The Keaton Collective," Lorraine trilled, as if I were slow. "It's our new brand. It's a boutique hotel, a curated artisan market, and a high-end event space. Chase has such a vision for the experience economy." Chase puffed up. "It's a lifestyle hub. Evelyn, we found the perfect property just outside Loveland. It's a total game changer." "A property," I repeated, my mind instantly pulling up the zoning maps I'd been studying. "You mean the old Miller farm?" They exchanged a surprised, annoyed look. "Well, yes," Lorraine said, her smile tightening. "How did you—" "Never mind. The point is, it's a huge opportunity, and we want you to be a part of it." "A part of it how?" "We're bringing you in on the ground floor," Chase said, leaning forward as if bestowing a great gift. "As a partner." "I'm not a hotelier, Chase." No, he said, waving his hand dismissively. "We've got the vision covered. We just need you for the bank stuff. Just a formality." Lorraine picked up the cue. "We're securing the commercial loan. Darling, a big one. But the bank, you know how they are. They're just sticky. They want so much. Your father and I, our assets are a little tied up right now." "They're tied up in this house," I said, looking around. "And the Escalade, and Chase's rent." "Evelyn, please, don't be cynical. This is for the whole family," Lorraine insisted. "This is our legacy. Chase has already done all the hard work. He's got the paperwork all ready." He slid a thick folded document from under the brochure, a loan application. "We just need you to co-sign." He tapped a blank signature line. "Right there. The bank said with your credit and your income, it's a slam dunk. We'll be approved by Tuesday." I looked at the number at the top of the page. $750,000. I laughed. It wasn't a polite laugh. It was a short, sharp, incredulous bark. My father flinched. Lorraine's face went rigid. "You want me," I said, speaking slowly, "to co-sign for $750,000 for a lifestyle hub, and you haven't even shown me a single number." "The numbers are in the plan, Evelyn," Chase said, annoyed. "It's all about the vision." "Vision doesn't pay interest. Chase, I want to see the cash flow projections. I want to see the operating cost analysis, itemized. I want to see your contingency budget for when the artisan market doesn't cover the mortgage for the first 18 months. I want to see your feasibility study and the full unredacted report from the property appraiser." They stared at me. "Well, we have an architect's rendering," Chase offered weakly, tapping the glossy brochure. "You're being so controlling, Evelyn," Lorraine cut in, her voice shifting from excited partner to wounded mother. "This isn't an audit. This is family dreaming together." "It's an audit," I said. "The second you ask for my signature on a loan for $750,000, it's not dreaming, it's my financial future, which you are asking me to personally guarantee, based on a brochure." I stood up. The meeting was over. "Here's my answer," I said, looking at all three of them. "This is the first and only time I will say it. No." For a second, I thought Lorraine might lunge at me. The venom in her face was that pure. Chase just looked confused, as if the word no was a foreign language he'd never encountered. My father, predictably, just looked at the floor, studying the pattern on the rug. "I am not signing that," I continued, "and if you want to have a real conversation, you can send me the numbers, the real ones. When the spreadsheets are ready, I'll review them." I walked out of the house. I could feel Lorraine's stare on my back, a physical, burning heat. I got in my car and, for the first time in my adult life, I locked the doors, drove away, and didn't feel a shred of guilt. I felt nothing but the cold, clean certainty of a decision correctly made. The texts started within an hour. The first was from my father. "Evelyn, you were very harsh. Lorraine is just trying to build something for us. Please reconsider." I replied, "Send me the numbers." The next was from Chase. "Seriously, E. Not cool. You embarrassed me. Just sign the damn paper. It's not a big deal." I replied, "Send me the numbers." Then came Lorraine, via my father's phone again, a 3-paragraph-long screed about family, loyalty, and my cold, ungrateful heart. It ended with the line I knew was coming. "You are going to embarrass your father at Thanksgiving. You are going to ruin this for everyone. Don't do this to him." The passive-aggressive threat, the emotional blackmail, the standard play from page 1 of her book. I didn't reply. I just saved the message, tagged it, and uploaded it to the cloud. The no had changed something. It had broken the pattern. And when you break a pattern, the other side panics. Panicked people make mistakes. They get sloppy. And Lorraine was nothing if not sloppy. I had been passively monitoring the family's shared email account for months, the one they all used for calendars and streaming service logins. It was a cesspit of spam, but it was also a direct window. 2 days after my no, a new email appeared. It wasn't sent to the group, but it was saved as a draft, a common, amateur way to pass information, thinking it's untraceable. The draft was from Lorraine's personal account, addressed to an address I didn't recognize. The subject was urgent, Vale Docs. The body was empty, but there was an attachment. A single PDF. Arthur Vale, PAO updated, v3.pdf. My blood went cold. POA, power of attorney. I downloaded the file. I opened it. It was a scanned copy of a durable power of attorney for my grandfather, Arthur Vale. It ostensibly gave the signatory full control over his financial and medical decisions in the event of his incapacitation. The signatory, in large, looping script, was Lorraine Keaton. I stared at the document. It looked almost right. The legal language was there, but something was off. I zoomed in. The signature line for my grandfather looked authentic, or at least a very good copy. But the date? The date was typed, and the font was just slightly wrong. It was Times New Roman, but the standard legal document from Arthur's firm would use century. I zoomed in 400%. I could see the pixelation. The date hadn't been typed in the original document. It had been added later. It was a sloppy digital edit. And the notary stamp, it was blurry. The name on it just illegible enough to be plausible, but just indistinct enough to be fake. This was not a legal document. This was a forgery, a clumsy, arrogant attempt to create a weapon. They were going to try to have my grandfather declared incompetent, and then use this to seize control of his assets. And the assets, I knew, were the land parcels. The name in the to field of the draft email. The one I didn't recognize. I ran it. It took me 10 minutes. The email address was registered to a shell, but the IP address that had last accessed it was linked to a public server in downtown Loveland, a server located in a building that also housed the offices of a single boutique developer. Damon West, Frontier Holdings, LLC. It all snapped into focus. The Keaton Collective wasn't the real play. The $750,000 loan was just a distraction, or maybe seed money for their getaway. The real play was to use this forged POA, declare Arthur incompetent, and sell his land, worth tens of millions, to Damon West for a fraction of its value. Chase's lifestyle hub was just his cut, the consulting fee for his part in the fraud. The stolen charity money was just what they'd been living on, the grease for the wheels, paying for the shady PR to build Lorraine's image and, I suspected, to pay the lawyers who had drafted this fake document. My hands were shaking, not from fear, from rage, a cold, forensic rage. I opened my secure drive. I went to the master folder, the one I had labeled Valerule. Inside, it was all there. Every scanned receipt, every loan payment, the Chase Debt 3 subfolder, the house roof HVAC spreadsheet, and the newest, most damning file, Community Fund Fraud Analysis. Now, I added POA Forgery L. Keaton, PDF. It was complete. My case was built. I had the motive, greed. I had the means, forgery, fraud. I had the conspiracy, Lorraine, Chase, Damon West. All I needed was the opportunity, the final piece. I thought of my grandfather. I thought of his question. Did you keep the receipts? I had. I had kept them all. I called him. Evelyn, he answered, his voice calm, as if he'd been waiting. They're moving on you, I said. No preamble. Lorraine has a forged power of attorney. They're working with Damon West. They're trying to steal the land. There was a long silence on the other end. I heard the clinking of ice in a glass. I am not surprised, he finally said. She has tried this before, a long time ago. Greed has no imagination. It only repeats itself. I have the proof, I said. All of it, the charity, the payoffs, the forged document. I have a complete ledger. Good, he said. Then you know what to do. I do, but I need the final trigger, the legal one, for the trust. Ah, yes. I could almost hear him nod. The character clause. It's been dormant for a long time. The Vale Family Trust was not a simple document. It was a fortress, and my grandfather, a man who had seen the worst of people, had built in a kill switch, a character safeguard provision. It was an obscure, complex piece of legal writing, but its function was simple. It was designed to protect the family from itself. It could be activated by a designated beneficiary, me, if two conditions were met. First, that the beneficiary had provided documented, substantial, and unreimbursed support to other family members. Second, that those same family members had engaged in an act of public and deliberate humiliation against the beneficiary, in the presence of at least 5 witnesses, with the intent to defame or disown. It was a clause written by a man who understood, better than anyone, that the deepest betrayals are not financial, they are personal. The ring, I said quietly. The ring, he confirmed. A bit of theater, I suppose, but my lawyers will need a specific time and date to mark the activation, a public event. Thanksgiving, I said. She's already cornered. She's furious I said no to the loan. She's been threatening me all week. She's going to stage something. Yes, Arthur said. She will. She has to prove to her new partners that she has you under control. She will try to banish you, to make you irrelevant. I know. She will fail, he said. I will be there. I will be your 6th witness. I will watch, and when the moment is right, I will take off the ring, and that, Evelyn, will be your cue to unlock the ledger. And the chair? I asked. A final, cold piece of the plan clicking into place. The chair of honor. Yes, my grandfather said, a note of grim satisfaction in his voice. Sit in her chair. That will be all the provocation she needs. We hung up. I looked at the calendar. Thanksgiving, 10 days away. I did not go to the police with the forgery. Not yet. A criminal case would be messy, slow. It would be my word against theirs. He said, she said family drama. I was not interested in drama. I was interested in consequences. The beauty of forensic accounting is that it is not about accusation. It is about presentation. You do not yell. You do not cry. You simply, calmly, present the data. You show your work. You let the numbers, in their cold, silent, irrefutable power, tell the story. I was not going to Thanksgiving for a fight. I was going for a board meeting. I was going to present my audit. I checked my pocket recorder. I charged the battery. I made 3 copies of the Valarule folder onto encrypted thumb drives. And then, I waited for the turkey. We moved from the living room to the dining room in a sluggish wave. Lorraine was at the head of the table, not seated, but directing, a conductor of domestic power. Arthur, you're here by me, of course, she said, touching my grandfather's arm. He inclined his head, his face an unreadable mask, and moved toward his designated spot. Father, I said, catching my father's eye. Evelyn, he said, a brief, hunted look, before he hurried to his chair at the head of the table. He immediately engaged his brother in a loud discussion about the weather, a human shield of noise. I was left standing, one of the last to arrive. Most of the family was seated, a noisy, chattering mass of 20 people. Lorraine continued her theater. Chase, honey, you and Maddie sit right there, where I can see you. They took the seats opposite my grandfather. The seat to my father's right, the seat of honor, remained empty. So did a lone seat at the far end, next to a teenage cousin absorbed in his phone. Lorraine knew. She knew I was standing. She was letting me wait, forcing me to be the last, forcing me to take the loser's seat at the end. It was the first move of the night. I did not move toward the end of the table. I simply stood, my purse in my hand, waiting. Finally, the room settled. Lorraine, seeing me still standing near the entryway, gave a theatrical sigh, a put-upon martyr's sigh. She picked up her wineglass and tapped it with a manicured nail. The chatter died down. She began, her voice brimming with a manufactured warmth. Want to say how wonderful this is, to have the family here, together. Her eyes found me, and I felt the chill of her focus. Thanksgiving is about gratitude, she continued, and I am so grateful for the positive energy we have built in this home. It is so important. I think we can all agree to protect that energy, to surround ourselves with people who support us, who build us up, and to, gently, let go of the negativity that tries to pull us down. It was a declaration of war, delivered with a smile. She was painting me as negativity before the turkey was even carved. Here, a cousin muttered, raising his glass. Lorraine smiled, her confidence bolstered. It's about family, the people who truly belong, who contribute, who don't just take. And then, Chase, the attack dog, unleashed. Speaking of negativity, he said, his voice loud, casual, a performance for the crowd. He was leaning back in his chair, a smirk on his face. I think we need to clear the air before we eat, right, Mom? Lorraine feigned surprise. Chase, what do you mean? I mean, it's just uncomfortable, he said, gesturing vaguely toward me. Some of us, Evelyn, don't seem to want to be part of the positive energy. It's like a whole Ice Queen thing, and I'm tired of it. I'm tired of walking on eggshells. Chase, this is not the time, my father said, his voice weak, pleading. No, Dad, it is the time, Chase snapped back, his confidence soaring. He had the room. We're all supposed to be family, but Evelyn here, she only shows up when she wants to judge everyone. She was so controlling at the meeting the other day, she almost ruined our big chance. That's not what happened, I said. My voice was quiet, but it cut through his whine. See? He shouted, pointing at me. Right there. Negative. Controlling. I'm sick of it. I think we should take a vote. A sick, excited silence fell over the table. A vote? An aunt asked, her eyes wide. Yeah, a vote, Chase said, standing up slightly. I vote, that Evelyn isn't welcome at family gatherings anymore. Not until she can fix her attitude. Not until she's ready to be part of the family instead of trying to audit it. My blood ran cold. This was it. This was the moment. The public and deliberate humiliation. Chase, sit down, my father ordered, but there was no power in it. No, I'm serious, Chase insisted. Let's see. Who agrees with me? Who is tired of the drama? All in favor of, asking Evelyn to leave, just for a while, until she changes? He raised his hand. I watched, frozen, as the scene played out. Lorraine, after a moment of feigned, oh goodness, slowly raised her own hand, a sad, painted-on look of regret on her face. A cousin, the one who had seconded Chase's motion, raised his hand. His wife followed, hesitantly. An uncle, Lorraine's brother, raised his, then another. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 6 hands. 6 hands, plus Chase and Lorraine, made 8. 8 people at a table of 20, voting to banish me. The others just stared at their plates. They were the silent witnesses, the ones who would later claim they didn't want to get involved. And my father? I looked at him. He was at the head of the table. He was the man of the house. He was my father. He was staring at the centerpiece, a gaudy explosion of plastic gourds. His jaw was working. But he said nothing. His hands were clenching and unclenching on the table, but they stayed down. His silence was not neutrality. It was cowardice. It was a choice. It was the loudest yes in the room. Well, Chase said, his voice thick with triumph, looks like the family has spoken, Ev. I had not moved. I had not spoken. I had simply watched. I had recorded every face, every raised hand, every averted gaze. I looked at the empty seat at the far end of the table, the seat of shame, the seat they had just voted to send me to. Then I looked at the empty seat of honor, right next to my father. I took a deep breath. I walked forward. I passed Chase, who was still smirking. I passed my aunts, who suddenly found their napkins fascinating. I reached the head of the table. My father did not look at me. I pulled out the heavy oak chair, the seat of honor. The sound of the legs scraping on the hardwood floor was deafening. I placed my purse on the floor, and I sat down. The silence that followed was not like the silence before. This was not quiet. This was a vacuum. It was the air being sucked from the room. I looked across the table. Lorraine was no longer smiling. Her face, which had been a mask of smug regret, had collapsed into something raw and ugly. Her eyes were wide, her mouth a thin white line. She had staged a public execution, and the victim had just taken a seat at the head of the table. She stood up, her own chair scraped backward. She walked toward me, a predator stalking its prey. Evelyn, she said. Her voice was a low, terrifying hiss. I looked up at her. I did not feel fear. I felt clear. I felt like an auditor who had just found the final, fatal error in the ledger. Lorraine, I replied, my voice perfectly level. Whose chair? She hissed, her voice trembling with a rage she could no longer control. Are you sitting in? I picked up the heavy linen napkin from my plate. I began to unfold it. I wasn't aware the chairs were assigned, I said calmly. That was the end, the snap. Her hand came up. It was fast. She didn't slap my face. She slammed her open palm onto my shoulder, hard, digging her fingers in. The force of it was a shock, a brutal, intimate act of violence. Get up, she screamed. The blow jolted me. My arm flew out. My hand struck the tall glass of red wine beside my plate. It tipped over, a slow, perfect arc of dark Cabernet. spilling across the pristine, white Irish linen. It spread, a blooming, arterial stain. "Now look what you've done," she shrieked, her control completely gone. She grabbed the back of my heavy oak chair. With both hands, she yanked it backward, violently. The chair legs screamed against the floor. I was thrown off balance, stumbling, catching myself on the table's edge as she tried to physically drag me, chair and all, away from the head of the table. "This seat," she was yelling, her face inches from mine, blotchy and red, "belongs to family." The room was frozen. I saw it all. Chase, his phone up, a bright red recording light on. Good. Witness, an aunt, her hand over her mouth. My father, finally on his feet, but just staring, paralyzed, coward. And then I heard it. Click. It was not loud. It was a small, metallic, precise sound, but in the ringing silence, it cut through everything. Every head turned. My grandfather, Arthur Vale, was standing at his place. He had not moved to intervene. He had not shouted. He was slowly, methodically, twisting the heavy gold signet ring on his right hand. He worked it over the knuckle. He held it in his palm for one, single, deliberate second. Then he reached out, and he placed the ring on the white tablecloth, just next to his empty dinner plate. It sat there, gleaming against the white, a silent line drawn, a verdict delivered. Lorraine, high on her own fury, didn't understand. She saw it as an alliance. "See?" she shrieked at me, gesturing to the ring. "See? You've disgusted him. You've disgusted everyone. You are not welcome here." My grandfather said nothing. He simply looked past her, past my father. His eyes met mine. This was it, the signal, the key. The character safeguard clause was now, officially, in play. I straightened up. I pushed the chair, still askew, back toward the table with my leg. I looked at Lorraine, who was breathing hard, her chest heaving. Then I reached down to my purse. I took out the small, silver digital voice recorder. I held it up, making sure the small microphone was visible. I pressed the record button. The small, discreet red light blinked to life, a mirror to the one on Chase's phone. I placed the recorder on the table, right next to the spreading red wine stain. "Please say that again, Lorraine," I said. My voice was calm. It was clear. "The part about me not being family, and the part about whose chair this is. I want to make sure the minutes are accurate." Her eyes widened. She looked at the recorder. She looked at the ring. She looked at me. What is that?" she stammered. "It's a recorder," I said. She finally saw the trap. Her face, which had been red with rage, began to pale. "You are done," she whispered, backing away, trying to reclaim her dignity. You are cut off. Do you hear me? Cut off." I looked at the red light. I looked at the gold ring. The tablecloth was a pristine white, now stained with the red of their violence. The gold of my grandfather's ring. My key sat waiting, and the red light of my recorder, my ledger, was blinking. No tears, no begging. "Acknowledged?" I said. It was time for the audit. I held my hand out, palm up. The recorder on the table was a black, silent witness. The red light pulsed. Chase's phone was still up, but his hand was starting to tremble. "Acknowledged," I repeated. "You've cut me off. Your statement is on the record." Lorraine just stared at me, her mouth opening and closing, a fish pulled from the water. "Now," I said, my voice dropping into the quiet, professional tone I used for depositions. "It's my turn. You've all had your vote. You've all had your say. You've called me cold. You've called me controlling. You've accused me of keeping score. Let's look at the scoreboard." I reached down into my purse, past the recorder's case, and my fingers found the smooth, thick edge of the manila folder. I pulled it out. It was not a dramatic gesture. I did not slam it down. I placed it, very gently, on the table, right next to the recorder, on a dry section of the white linen. The room was so quiet, I could hear the hum of the refrigerator in the kitchen. "You're right about one thing, Lorraine," I said, my gaze sweeping the table, landing on every person who had raised their hand and lingering on my father, who looked sick. "I do keep score. It's my job. But I don't use a pen. I use a calculator. And I have kept the books on this family for a very, very long time." I opened the folder. The first page I pulled out was a single sheet of paper. It was not a letter. It was a summary statement. An executive summary of a life lived in default. "This," I said, "is a 5-year summary, just the last 5 years. I have the complete records going back to my mother's illness. But let's start small." I placed it in the center, turning it so my father could read it. "Total financial support provided by me, Evelyn Hart, to this household, including emergency debt servicing for Chase Keaton, from January 1st, 2020 to November 1st, 2025, the total, to the penny, is $131,524.19. A collective gasp. Someone, an aunt, whispered, "That's not possible." "Oh, it is," I said, "and I have the receipts." I reached back into the folder. I didn't pull out a messy stack. I pulled out a slim-bound report. "This is the appendix. Every line item on that summary sheet is backed by a dated, time-stamped, cross-referenced document. Let's review the highlights, shall we?" I turned the page. Item A, the roof, replaced in August of 2021. You told me insurance had denied the claim due to a clerical error. The clerical error was that you had never paid the premium. I paid the roofer directly. $21,500. The reference code for the wire transfer is 77B4. I looked at Lorraine. Item B, the HVAC system, July 2023. The unit just died. You said, "I co-signed the loan. I have made every single payment. Total to date, $9,200. Reference code, 94C1. I turned the page again. Item C, my mother's residual medical debts, the ones you forgot about until a lien was threatened on this house, $32,000, paid in full, April 2022. That was my down payment. By the way, reference 4506. And then, I said, we have the Chase Keaton Supplemental Fund. Chase, who had been lowering his phone, snapped it back up. "You're lying." "Am I?" I pulled out 3 separate, stapled packets of paper. "Chase, this is for you. Here is the paperwork for the $10,000 predatory loan I paid off in 2021. Here is the $15,000 misunderstanding with your bookie in 2023. And here is the $12,000 credit card consolidation from just last spring, all paid by me to protect this family, to protect, as you so elegantly put it, the positive energy." I let the papers sit on the table. The weight of them was physical. "But that," I said, "is just the old business. That's just the debt. That's me being controlling. Let's talk about the new business, the Keaton Collective business." Lorraine's face went from white to a strange, mottled gray. "You're all aware of Lorraine's wonderful charity work," I said to the table. "The Loveland Winter Heating Fund. So noble." I pulled out a new set of documents, bank statements. "Here are the quarterly statements for the fund for the last 2 years. And here," I said, pulling out a slim color-coded chart, "is a simple analysis. Every quarter, there is a significant cash withdrawal. Always for community outreach, always just under the $10,000 reporting threshold. And curiously, every single withdrawal happens to fall within a 48-hour window of Lorraine's scheduled duty as treasurer. A 40% administrative overhead. Lorraine, for a heating fund? Where did all that outreach money go?" You have no right," she stammered. "I have no right?" I pulled out another sheet. "Here is the incorporation document for Keaton Consulting, LLC, registered to your PMO box, and here are the canceled checks from the fund, made out to that LLC. You weren't just defaulting on your debts to me. You were stealing. You were stealing from the poor, From the elderly, to fund… What? The Escalade? The Cashmere? No, my father whispered, shaking his head. No, Lorraine, tell her no. Lorraine didn't say anything. She was staring at the forged power of attorney. I had saved it for last. I was wondering where the seed money for your new project was coming from, I said. And then I found this. I pulled out the single printed sheet. The PDF, Arthur Vale Poe updated v3.pdf. I placed it in front of my grandfather. He looked at it, his face impassive. A power of attorney, I said, my voice ringing in the silence. Granting Lorraine Keaton full control over Arthur Vale's assets in the event of his incapacitation, a bold move, especially since he seems perfectly fine to me. He gave me that, Lorraine shrieked. He's getting older. He asked me to help. He did, I said, because I found this version saved as a draft in your email, and when I zoomed in, I pulled out a second sheet, a magnified screenshot. The font on the date, it's pixelated. Lorraine, it's a clumsy, digital forgery. You were going to have him declared incompetent, weren't you? After you voted me out, after I was no longer a problem. And what was the plan then? I continued, the pieces locking into place for the whole room to see. Sell his land, maybe? The parcels just outside town? I looked at Damon West's name. I didn't even have to say it. No, I had something better. I was curious, I said, about your pre-meeting last Sunday, the one where you tried to get me to co-sign on a $750,000 loan, the one where I said no. I picked up my phone. Not the recorder, my phone. You see, Lorraine, you make a lot of calls from your car, your new Escalade. It has a wonderful, hands-free Bluetooth system, and that system, unfortunately for you, sometimes picks up background noise. I pressed play. The room filled with Lorraine's voice, not her public, cooing voice, her hard, angry, business voice. Just don't get it. Damon, she's being impossible. She's reviewing the numbers. What is there to review? It's a vision. And then, a man's voice, smooth and deep, from the background of the call. So handle her. Lorraine, you said she was just a bitter spinster. You said she was handled. Get her to sign? Or get her out of the way? We can't move on the old man's land until your end is clean. My grandfather's head snapped up. I pressed pause. That, I said, was a call you made last Monday. The Damon is Damon West. Frontier Holdings, LLC, your partner. The man you're trying to sell my grandfather's land to. I pulled out the last two documents from the folder. Here, I said, sliding one toward Chase, is a copy of a preliminary sales agreement between a shell company for Frontier Holdings and look, the Keaton Collective. It details a 15% consulting fee to be paid directly to Chase Keaton upon the successful below-market value sale of the Vale parcels. I looked at my stepbrother. His face was the color of spoiled milk. His phone was no longer recording. It had fallen from his hand. And finally, I said, pulling out the last sheet of paper, the plan to get me out of the way. It was a printout of their text messages, a group chat between Lorraine, Chase, and the cousin who had made the motion to vote me out. I read from it. Chase, she won't sign. She's asking for spreadsheets. Lorraine, don't worry, I have a plan for Thanksgiving. We'll make her toxic. We'll frame her as the one who is ungrateful and negative. Chase, like, vote her off the island? Lorraine, exactly. Publicly. She won't recover from the humiliation. She'll be gone by Christmas, and the land will be ours by February. I placed the final sheet on the pile. The evidence sat in the middle of the table, a monument to their greed, surrounded by half-eaten bread rolls and cooling turkey. The entire story had changed. The narrative had been ripped from their control. I was no longer the ungrateful, cold daughter. I was the auditor. And this was the final report. The room was dead. The only sound was an aunt, the one who had seconded the vote, who was now quietly, horribly, crying into her napkin. My father had sunk into his chair, his face in his hands, his whole body shaking in silent sobs. Lorraine was just staring at the pile of paper as if she could will it to burst into flames. I reached into my folder one last time. There was one file left. It was an old audio cassette, one I had digitized. It was a voicemail, my real mother's voice, from the hospital, near the end. Her voice was weak, slurred from morphine, but it was clear. Evie, don't let them make you small. You're bigger than all of this. I had it queued on my phone. I could have played it. I could have used her memory as the final, emotional blade. I looked at my father, a broken, weeping man. I looked at Lorraine, a cornered, pathetic criminal. I hit stop. I put my phone back in my pocket. I would not use my mother's pain to twist the knife. My case was made. The numbers had done their work. I began to gather my papers. Neatly, methodically, I slid the summary, the receipts, the forged POA, the bank statements, the text messages, all of it, back into the manila folder. I stood up. I pushed my chair in. I looked at the stunned, silent, horrified faces of my family. My report is complete, I said. I will be submitting these findings to my grandfather's attorneys and to the trustee of the Vale Family Trust. Tomorrow morning, I will also be submitting the file on the Loveland Winter Heating Fund to the State Attorney General's office. I turned to Lorraine and Chase. The rest, I said, my voice clear and final. The courts and time will tell. I picked up my purse, my recorder, and my folder, and I walked out of the house. I did not sleep. I drove. The adrenaline from the Thanksgiving detonation burned off around 3 a.m. Somewhere on the dark stretch of highway between Loveland and Fort Collins, it left behind not exhaustion, but a cold, clear, silent void. The rage was gone. The hurt was gone. All that remained was the work. I showered, put on a severe charcoal gray suit, and bypassed my own office. At 8:59 a.m. on the Friday after Thanksgiving, I walked into the downtown Denver offices of Dalton and Pike. The reception area was not designed for comfort. It was glass, steel, and white marble, a place where the air was filtered, and the only sound was the quiet digital click of the stock market ticker. It was a place designed to process facts, not feelings. Maris Dalton was not a person you met. Maris was a force you presented to. She was standing against a floor-to-ceiling window, a sharp silhouette against the Denver skyline. When she turned, she was exactly as I had pictured. She was a woman in her late 50s, with a dark, architectural haircut that looked like it had been cut with a laser. She wore a black suit and no jewelry. Her eyes were the color of a winter sky. She did not smile. She did not offer coffee. She just pointed to the single, uncomfortable chair opposite her monolithic desk. Ms. Hart, Arthur Vale said you would be punctual. He also said you would be bringing a complete file. I like complete files. Her voice was like fine gravel. I brought the file, I said. I did not recount the story. I did not mention the spilled wine, the raised hands, or the tears. I placed the manila folder, my 9 months of work, in the center of her glass desk. Maris put on a pair of minimalist, black-framed reading glasses. She opened the folder. For the next 20 minutes, the only sound in that sterile, expensive room was the quiet shift of paper turning. She did not read the text messages first. She did not look at the photos. She went straight to the spreadsheets. She scanned my 5-year summary. She traced a line item with one sharp fingernail. She flipped to the appendix. She found the corresponding wire transfer receipt. She checked the reference code. Then she nodded. A tiny, sharp, satisfied movement. $131,524.19, she said. It was not a question. To the penny, comprehensive. That's the personal ledger, I said. She turned the page. Keaton Consulting, LLC, the Loveland Winter Heating Fund. She paused. Sloppy. This is very, very sloppy. She used her own post office box. That's the community fraud. She finally reached the last document, the forged power of attorney. She held the paper up to the light, as if she could feel the lie in it. Pixelation on the date, she murmured. Amateur. And Damon West. Frontier Holdings. We know Mr. West. She placed the paper down, perfectly aligned with the corner of her desk. She closed the folder. She looked up at me. Her eyes were not sympathetic. They were appreciative. It was the look of a master craftsman admiring a well-built, lethal machine. Most clients, Maris Dalton said, bring me a cardboard box full of tissues, receipts, and a convoluted story. You brought me a conviction. I admire that. I'm not here for admiration, Ms. Dalton. I'm here for a strategy. Good. She steepled her fingers. We don't do drama here, Ms. Hart. We don't detonate in public. We document in private, and when the documentation is complete, we find the file speaks for itself. Your file is screaming. She turned to a fresh legal pad. Here's the roadmap. Pay attention. 1, she wrote the number. The personal debt. This is a simple civil matter. This morning, my office will draft a formal demand letter. It will be couriered to your father and to Lorraine Keaton, at their home, to be signed for by Monday. It will detail the full amount, $131K, plus statutory interest, compounded over the past 5 years. It will include a non-negotiable repayment schedule. The first payment is due in 30 days. If they default, we file the suit and place a lien on the house. Good. 2, the external players, this Damon West and his shell, Frontier Holdings, and the PR agency I see mentioned in these texts. We will send a different kind of letter, a warning, a litigation hold notice. We will inform them that they are party to a potential conspiracy to commit fraud and slander. We will advise them that any deletion of electronic records, text messages, or emails will be considered spoliation of evidence and will be met with severe sanctions. This, she said, looking at me, cuts them off. It isolates Lorraine. It makes her toxic to her own partners. And the forged POA, the stolen charity money? That, Maris said, tapping the folder, is not for a letter. That is for the district attorney. But we do not file that today. A criminal case is slow, and it's public. We hold that. That is our leverage. First, we secure the assets. She flipped to a new page. 3, the Vale Family Trust. This was the core. This was the real reason I was here. Arthur called me last night, immediately after he left your father's house, Maris said. He informed me, as the trust's legal counsel, that an event marker had occurred. The trustee is on standby. The 30-day activation clock has begun. The ring, I said. The ring, she nodded. A bit of theater, as Arthur calls it, but a brilliant legal trigger. The trust documents, as you know, are very specific. You are here to formally activate the character safeguard clause. Maris pulled a thick leather-bound document from her credenza. The trust. She opened it to a section marked with a yellow tab. Condition 1, she read. The activating beneficiary must demonstrate, through documented evidence, a pattern of substantial, non-reciprocal financial support to other beneficiaries, exceeding 60% of said beneficiary's own contributions to the family welfare over a 5-year period. She tapped my manila folder. Your ledger. You weren't contributing more than 60%. You were contributing 100% of all emergency capital. They were a net negative. Condition 1 is met and exceeded. She turned the page in the trust. Condition 2. The aforementioned support must be met with a documented, public, and deliberate act of humiliation, defamation, or disownment, witnessed by no fewer than 5 non-involved parties. There were 20 people in the room, I said, my voice flat, recalling the scene. 8 people, including Lorraine and Chase, raised their hands in a public vote to banish me from the family. I was physically assaulted. My stepbrother filmed the entire event on his phone. He filmed it? Maris looked intrigued. He thought it was entertainment. I have my own audio recording, and you have the testimony of my grandfather. We won't even need the video, though we will subpoena it, Maris said. The vote is the key, a deliberate act of humiliation, witnessed by no fewer than 5. You had 8 raised hands and a dozen silent witnesses. Condition 2 is met. So, what happens now? The clause is activated. The ring's removal was the signal. Arthur's affidavit, which he is signing at his own attorney's office as we speak, confirms his witness to the event and his endorsement. It is an ironclad, private, legal maneuver. It bypasses the probate courts. It bypasses your father. It bypasses Lorraine completely. Maris leaned forward, her gravelly voice dropping. The clause states that upon this activation, all administrative control of the primary Vale assets, specifically the land parcels, the development rights, and the investment portfolios, transfers from the primary administrator, Arthur, to the activating beneficiary. You? I let that sink in. The land they had tried to steal. The assets they had forged documents to acquire. For how long? I asked. The trust specifies a 3-year administrative term. After 36 months, control reverts to the trustee, or to Arthur, if he is able. But for the next 3 years, Evelyn, you are the administrator. You are the Vale estate. The weight of it was cold and heavy. It was not a victory. It was a transfer of responsibility. But, Maris continued, with that power comes oversight. Arthur was very clear on this. His affidavit includes a stipulation, a mandatory, independent, quarterly audit of your administration. I would demand it, I said. I'm not them. I am not Lorraine. I want a clean ledger. I know, Maris said. That's why you are going to fix her other fraud. She pointed to the charity file. The stolen community money. We are not just going to shut it down. We are going to replace it. We will attach a new, permanent covenant to the Vale Land Trust. It will mandate that a minimum of 25% of all annual profits generated by the Vale assets, be it land leases, investments, whatever, will be diverted into a new fund. We will call it the Vale Winter Energy Fund. And this one, she added, a flicker of something new in her eyes, will have a public-facing, real-time ledger, full transparency, every dollar in, every dollar out, published on a website, weekly. It was brilliant. It was not just punishment. It was a structural correction. It was taking Lorraine's specific, dark-room theft and replacing it with a solution of blinding, transparent light. One last thing, I said, as I stood to leave. The audits, the independent, quarterly audits of my new administration, I don't want your firm doing them. I don't want Arthur's firm doing them. Maris raised a single, sharp eyebrow. I want them done by high-timber CPA, I said. I named the most aggressive, bloodthirsty, and expensive accounting firm in the state. I want them to treat me as a hostile target. I want them to try and find a single misplaced penny. No relatives, no friends, only auditors. For the first time, Maris Dalton smiled. It was a small, thin, terrifying expression. I will make the call this afternoon, she said. They will be delighted. I walked out of her office. The demand letters would go out Monday. The trust transfer would be filed by the end of the day. The DA's office would get the fraud file when we were ready. I walked out into the bright, cold November air. The drama was over. The war had just been fully, legally, and beautifully mapped. The first counterattack was not a lawsuit. It was a smear campaign. The demand letters from Maris Dalton, delivered by a grim-faced courier, had landed at the Loveland house the Monday after Thanksgiving. The 30-day clock on the $131,000 debt was ticking. The response from my father, from Lorraine, from Chase, was absolute, deafening silence. But they had not been idle. They had simply outsourced the battle. The attack came on Wednesday. It arrived in my inbox not as a threat, but as a link, forwarded by a former colleague from my old Fort Collins office. The subject line was a single, pained word, Evelyn. The link led to an article. It was hosted on a website I had never heard of. A slick, professional-looking layout under the banner of the Northern Colorado Chronicle. It had all the appearances of a legitimate, independent investigative journal. The headline was a masterpiece of weaponized slander. Local heiress in shocking elder abuse scandal. The secret financial war of Evelyn Hart. My hands went cold. I read the article. It was anonymous, attributed only to a concerned citizen. It was a complete, brilliant inversion of the truth. In this narrative, I was not the auditor. I was the predator. I was a cold, calculating, and estranged daughter who, bitter about being cut out of the family, had launched a vindictive campaign. It claimed I had used my grandfather's frail mental state to seize control of his assets. It painted Arthur Vale, the sharpest man I had ever known, as a vulnerable, confused senior citizen, a victim. But the real poison was in the second half. The article claimed I had, in my power grab, also improperly seized control of the Loveland Winter Heating Fund. It didn't just imply I was now the one embezzling. It stated it as fact, accusing me of funneling community money into unknown personal accounts. They had taken my entire case, my inheritance of the trust, my audit of the charity, and turned it inside out, presenting me as the criminal. It was Lorraine's voice, her theatrical, self-victimizing narrative, polished and sharpened by a professional. The article was good. It was very, very good, and it spread like gasoline. By Wednesday afternoon, the link was all over the Loveland community Facebook pages. By Thursday morning, I was called into my managing partner's office at Northwind Analytics. Mark, a man I respected, couldn't meet my eye. He just gestured to the chair. "Evelyn, we're getting calls." "It's a lie," I said. My voice was flat. "I know you. Evelyn, my gut says it's a lie," he said, rubbing his temples. "But my inbox says we have a problem. The Chronicle article. It's messy, and it names you as one of our senior auditors." He didn't have to say the rest. I was a liability. "3 clients," he said, finally looking at me. "3 of our biggest local accounts have called this morning. They are pausing their quarterly audits with us, indefinitely, pending a resolution to your personal matters." A pause, not a cancellation, a pause. It was the corporate version of the averted eyes at the Thanksgiving table. It was the coward's rejection. I felt a cold knot tighten in my stomach. This was not just slander. This was damage. This was real. I had just lost my firm over $75,000 in annual billing. "What are you going to do?" Mark asked. "I am not going to write a blog post," I said. "I am not going to engage in a public fight. I am going to document the damages, and I am going to let my attorney handle it." I went back to my desk. I opened a new, password-protected spreadsheet. I logged the date, the time, and the names of the 3 clients. I calculated the lost revenue. I named the file Slander Damages V1. Then I picked up the phone. Maris Dalton's voice was a razor blade. "I've seen it. Stay offline. Do not reply. Do not talk to the press. Do not talk to your clients. You say nothing to anyone. We are tracing it." Her digital forensics team, as I had suspected, was not comprised of amateurs. It took them less than 6 hours. "It's a professional hit," she said, calling me back. "The Northern Colorado Chronicle is a ghost. It was registered 3 weeks ago, paid for with an anonymous gift card, and hosted on a server in Romania. So it's a dead end." "Not at all," Maris said, and I could hear the cold satisfaction in her voice. "The site is hosted in Romania, but the money that paid for the PR firm to write the article and the money that paid for the boosted social media ads you're seeing, that money is domestic, and it's sloppy." She continued, "We found 2 contracts, both for digital media consulting, one for $4,000, one for $5,000, just under the reporting thresholds, both paid, in the last 2 weeks, by Frontier Holdings, LLC. Damon West. And," Maris added, "the PR agency they paid? Apex Media Strategies. It is, by a stunning coincidence, the exact same firm that was listed as doing the pro bono community outreach for Lorraine's fraudulent heating fund. It's a closed loop of fraud." "So, what's the move?" I asked. The move, Maris said, is a tactical nuke. We are sending an ultimatum. The letter, which Maris forwarded to me for my records, was a thing of legal beauty. It was not a request. It was a 72-hour demand, sent to the server in Romania, to the registered agent for Apex Media, and to Damon West, personally, at his office. It demanded 4 things. 1. The immediate, permanent, and total removal of the defamatory article. 2. A public, written apology and full retraction, to be posted on the same homepage. 3. Full reimbursement for all of Maris's legal fees. 4. Full reimbursement for my documented financial losses, namely, the 3 paused client contracts. And Maris said, I took the liberty of attaching an appendix. It includes a draft of the per se defamation lawsuit we will be filing in 72 hours. It also includes the case law from 6 previous, similar cases our firm has won. Oh, and as a final courtesy, I attached copies of the wire transfer receipts from Frontier Holdings to Apex Media. We are not just telling them the article is a lie. We are showing them we know exactly who paid for the lie. The 72-hour clock started. I did not have to wait long. 48 hours later, on Friday afternoon, I clicked the link. Page not found. The entire Northern Colorado Chronicle website had vanished. It was gone. Scrubbed from the internet. They had complied. They had blinked. But there was no apology. There was no retraction. And my phone did not ring with an offer to pay my legal fees or my lost revenue. They took it down, I said to Maris. Yes, they chose the expensive option, she replied, her voice cold. By taking it down, they admit they cannot defend the article in court. By not apologizing, they refuse to mitigate damages. Their silence is not a victory. It is an admission of guilt without the one thing a judge looks for: remorse. We will add the cost of this silence, all of it, to the final civil suit. They just bought themselves a very expensive 48 hours. The article was gone, but the whispers remained. In a community like Loveland, a retraction never travels as fast as the original lie. The following week, I received a call. It was Pastor Dave, from the small Methodist church my mother had attended, a church I had been anonymously funding for a decade, paying for their new roof and, ironically, their winter heating bills. Evelyn, he began, his voice thick with a pained, sanctimonious regret. The church board and I, we saw that unfortunate article, and while we know it's been taken down, well, where there's smoke, you know. I knew. The board, he continued, we've been preying on it. We just feel, given the questions that were raised, that it would be best if we quietly remove your family name from the donor plaque for the new fellowship hall. We don't want any distractions. My family name, my mother's name, they were removing my mother's name from the wall. I understand your position, Pastor, I said. My voice was a shard of ice. You must do what you feel is right. I hung up. I did not rage. I did not send them my ledger. I did not plead my case. I did something better. I sent him a link. It was the link to the brand new, public-facing website, ValeWinterEnergyFund.org. Maris's team had put it live that morning. It was my response. It was my only response. It was a website built on a foundation of absolute radical transparency. The front page was not a picture of a smiling family. It was a live, real-time balance sheet. It showed the 25% asset covenant from the Vale Trust. It showed the initial seed money transferred, and it showed, in a clear, itemized list, the first scheduled block payments to 60 pre-vetted, low-income households. It showed the name of the independent auditing firm, High Timber CPA, on the masthead. It showed every dollar in and every dollar out. I sent that same link to my 3 paused clients. I sent it to Mark at Northwind. I sent it to the Real Loveland Reporter Herald. I did not add a note. I did not add an explanation. I just sent the data. The narrative, the one Lorraine had paid for, began to starve. the whispers began to change. The community was not made of fools. They were made of numbers. They understood a utility bill. The news story became simple. Evelyn Hart had receipts, spreadsheets, and a public-facing ledger. Lorraine Keaton had a deleted blog post. The final move, however, belonged to Arthur. The old, now dissolved heating fund board called an emergency meeting at the local library, ostensibly to discuss the hostile takeover of their fund. It was Lorraine's last gasp, an attempt to rally her old friends. The room was packed. Pastor Dave was there, looking pale. My 3 clients were standing in the back. Lorraine's friends were in the front. I was there, with the lead auditor from High Timber CPA. I was at the front, presenting the new charter. One of Lorraine's friends stood up, her voice trembling with indignation. "This is all very slick, Ms. Hart, all these numbers, but how do we know? We all heard that your own grandfather is a victim in this. How can we trust you with our town's money when you can't be trusted with your own family?" The slander was back, hanging in the air. Before I could answer, a chair scraped at the back of the room. The small crowd parted. Arthur Vale, in his tweed jacket, walked slowly down the center aisle. He looked at no one. He walked directly to the front table where I stood with the auditors. He did not look at the woman who had spoken. He looked at the ledger. Then, with the entire room watching, he slowly, deliberately, twisted the heavy gold signet ring on his right hand. He worked it over the knuckle. He took it off. He placed it on the table. The click echoed in the silent room. He turned to the crowd. His voice was not loud, but it filled the space. "My granddaughter," he said, his voice a low rumble, "believes in numbers. So do I." He pointed to the ring. This is paper. It's the old way. It says who I am." Then he pointed to the High Timber auditor and to the public-facing website projected on the wall. "That," he said, "is the new paper. The money goes where the paper says it goes. The truth is in the ledger. It always has been." He turned. He did not say another word. He just walked back down the aisle and out of the library. The meeting was over. The narrative was broken. The smear was dead. The slow, massive, grinding flow of public opinion had cracked, and it was finally, irrevocably, moving my way. The public victory at the library, the clean, undeniable data of the new Vale Energy Fund, did not create peace. It created desperation. When you take away a predator's camouflage of legitimacy, they do not apologize. They do not reflect. They revert to their true nature. The spreadsheets had failed them. The lies had failed them. All they had left was brute, stupid force. The attack came at 12:04 a.m. on a Thursday. I was not in bed. I was at my desk in my Fort Collins apartment, the apartment that was my sanctuary, my fortress of clean lines and quiet order. I was cross-referencing the initial transfer statements for the new trust, a task I found soothing. The only sound was the quiet click of my keyboard. The sound that ripped the night apart was not a sound I was used to. It was an explosion of glass, a percussive, shattering roar that was immediately followed by the rush of cold, 30-degree November air. I didn't scream. My body went perfectly, icily still. I work in fraud. My first instinct is never panic. It is observation. The living room window was gone. A jagged, gaping hole looked out onto the dark street, and on my hardwood floor, gleaming amidst a galaxy of shattered glass, was a rock. It was a heavy piece of river rock, wrapped in a piece of paper, secured with a rubber band. I did not touch it. I photographed it from 3 angles. I photographed the window. Then I called the police. While I waited, I looked at the paper. I could read the writing from the kitchen. It was crude, thick marker scrawl. "You will regret Sunday." It was not a request. It was a promise. When the police left, having taken the rock as evidence and my statement with a bored, procedural detachment, I called Maris. It was 2:30 in the morning. She answered on the first ring. "They've escalated," I said. I told her about the window. I told her about the note. "Good," she said. her voice wide awake and sharp as glass. "This is not a civil dispute anymore. This is a criminal conspiracy. Did you get a case number?" I gave it to her. "What now?" "Now," she said, "you check your neighbor's cameras." My neighbor, Mr. Henderson, was a retired software engineer and a privacy fanatic, which, paradoxically, meant he had 4 high-definition, night vision cameras monitoring every angle of his property. He was also a night owl. "Already got it," he said, his voice grainy over the phone. "Saw the squad car, a blue sedan, looked like a Hyundai, pulled up at 12:03, lights off, one guy, hoodie, got out, through, got back in. They were gone in 10 seconds. I got a partial plate." He gave me the 3 letters and 2 numbers he could make out. I thanked him. I hung up. I did not need to run a search. I already had the file. I opened my Valerule folder and went to the Chase Associates subfolder. I found the file on Joseph Joey Gallo, a bouncer with 2 priors for assault, who Chase had listed as a character reference on a rental application I'd had to vet. The car registered to him, a blue Hyundai Elantra. The license plate was a perfect match. They were not smart. They were predictable. They were leaving a trail of breadcrumbs, and I was the one collecting them. I saved the information, attached it to the police report number, and emailed the new file to Maris. The next day was Saturday. They were escalating quickly now. They were panicking. I left my apartment, the window now a large, ugly sheet of plywood, to take out the recycling. The large communal bins were in the alley behind my building. The air in the alley was still, but something was wrong. It smelled, not of garbage, it smelled of chemicals, of gasoline. My bin, the one marked for my unit number, was blackened and melted, a warped, Dali-esque sculpture of black plastic. The concrete wall behind it was scorched. I called the fire department. The investigator, a weary-looking woman with soot on her jacket, was there in 15 minutes. She didn't need long. "This wasn't kids with a firecracker, ma'am," she said, kicking the molten plastic with her boot. "This is classic, lighter fluid, lots of it. They poured a whole can in, tossed a match, and ran. This was meant to go up, and to take the building wall with it." She looked at my boarded-up window. "You having problems with someone?" "You could say that," I said. "Well, you're filing this," she said, handing me a slip. "This is felony arson, attempted structural damage. This is not a prank." I filed my second police report in 36 hours. The charge was no longer intimidation, it was arson. They had tried to burn my home down. The rage that filled me was so cold and so precise it felt like energy. This was the end of defense. But Lorraine, in her infinite arrogance, had one more move. She still believed she was the protagonist of this story. She believed she had power. On Saturday afternoon, my smart doorbell rang. I was on the phone with Maris, detailing the arson report. "Hold on," I said. I pulled up the video feed. My heart stopped, not in fear, but in disbelief. It was Lorraine, on my doorstep, in Fort Collins. She was not alone. She was with a nervous-looking man holding a large metal toolbox, a locksmith. Lorraine looked ravaged. Her expensive hair was a mess. She was wearing a parka, even though it wasn't that cold, and she was vibrating with a visible, kinetic fury. I did not open the door. I unmuted the speaker. "Can I help you, Lorraine?" My voice, amplified by the small speaker, was clear and cold. She jumped. She hadn't expected me to be there. She turned to the locksmith, ignoring my camera. "This is the residence. I am the co-owner. I have been locked out by her. I need you to drill the lock and change it." The locksmith looked from her to the camera and back. He was deeply uncomfortable. "Ma'am, I need to see some proof of residence. A utility bill? An ID?" "I am Lorraine Keaton," she shrieked. "This is a family property. Her father, my husband, he paid for this." "Lorraine," I said, my voice cutting through her performance, "that is a lie. You are trespassing. You have never been in this building. You are not on the mortgage." You are not on the title. This is a family matter, she screamed at the locksmith. Open the door. I am calling the police, I said. I already have, she snapped, pulling out her own phone. I am reporting you for locking me out of my own asset. The sheer, blinding arrogance of it was breathtaking. She was the one who had just, in all likelihood, conspired to commit arson, and she was standing on my doorstep trying to claim ownership. The police arrived, a different squad car this time. Lorraine, seeing them, immediately dissolved into her victim role, clutching her chest, her voice breaking. Officers, thank God, my stepdaughter. She's mentally unstable. She's locked me out of my home. The officer, a young woman with a tired, patient face, looked at Lorraine, then at the doorbell camera. Ma'am, can you please step back? I opened the door. I was holding a single, thick folder. Officers, I said. I am Evelyn Hart. I am the sole owner of this property. This woman is Lorraine Keaton. She is not a resident. She is not on the title. I handed the officer the folder. This is the deed. This is the title insurance. This is my driver's license with this address. And this, I said, tapping my smart doorbell, is the complete, high-definition recording of her entire attempt to gain entry by fraud. The officer looked at my paperwork for about 10 seconds. It was inarguable. She looked at Lorraine, whose performance had frozen on her face. Ma'am, the officer said to Lorraine, her voice leaving no room for negotiation. You need to leave this property immediately. You are not a resident. This is a civil matter. And if you stay, you will be arrested for trespassing. But my husband, Lorraine stammered, the script gone. Now, ma'am. The locksmith was already packing his tools, practically running back to his van. Lorraine, defeated and publicly humiliated on a stranger's doorstep, gave me one look. It was not anger. It was pure, unadulterated hatred. It was the look of a queen who had been overthrown by a number. She turned and stormed off. I downloaded the footage. I saved it. Harassment Trespassing L. Keaton, MP4. I sent the link to Maris. The counter-narrative was launched within an hour. The FOCO Watchdog, a new, anonymous blog, suddenly had a story. Sources claimed Evelyn Hart, under immense mental strain from the lawsuits, was acting erratically. They suggested the broken window and the trash fire were self-inflicted cries for help. I called Maris, my voice shaking with this new, insidious attack. They are saying I'm staging it. They are calling me crazy. Good, Maris said, her voice sharp. Stop reacting. Start documenting. This is a gift. This isn't slander. It's consciousness of guilt. Guilty parties create false narratives to preempt the truth. They are admitting, on the record, that these events happened, and they are providing a cover story. This is what we show a jury. Save every post, every comment. This is the rope. Let them braid it. The next day, a courier delivered a box, not a letter, a banker's box, old and dusty. It was from Arthur. Inside, there were no words of comfort. There were files, old, yellowed, brittle files from 1999. A note on top, in Arthur's spiky, precise hand. Thought these might be relevant. History repeats. I sat on my floor and I read. It was a file he had compiled on a young developer, a land deal, a forged document, and, at the center of the web, a much younger Lorraine. She had tried this before, 25 years ago. She had tried to forge his name to secure a loan for a partner. Arthur had not confronted her. He had quietly, methodically, crushed her partner, bankrupted the developer, and then, as his final move, had forced her to sign a post-nuptial agreement with my father, walling her off from the Vale assets forever. An agreement my father had, I was certain, never known about. She hadn't just repeated her playbook. She had been running the same con, on the same man, for my entire life. She was just waiting for him to die. My phone rang, an unknown number. I let it go to voicemail. I did not need more chaos. I checked it an hour later. My blood ran cold. Evie, Evelyn, it's Dad. His voice was a hesitant, broken whisper. I had not heard this voice in 20 years. Please, I, I just need to hear your side of it. Please, call me. Lorraine she's not. The message cut off. He had either hung up or been interrupted. I stared at the phone. I just need to hear your side of it. It was the first time in my life he had ever admitted one existed. The crack, the foundation of Lorraine's kingdom, built on his willful ignorance, was finally, irrevocably, breaking. I saved the voicemail. I sent it to Maris. I did not call back. Sunday arrived, the day I was supposed to regret. I was not at my apartment. Maris had insisted. I was in a sterile, anonymous hotel room, my laptop open, my phone on the table. I waited. Midnight on Thursday had been the rock. Saturday had been the fire and the locksmith. Sunday was the deadline. I watched the clock. 8 p.m., 9, 10. My phone rang at 10:05 p.m. It was Maris. Well, she said, it seems Sunday has been regretted. What happened? The police, Maris said, acted on the Gallo file. They've been watching him since the rock. It seems Mr. Gallo is on probation, and his probation officer does not like him consorting with known felons or committing new felonies. They arrested him? At 10 p.m. tonight, on Sunday, he was arrested for violation of parole, felony intimidation, and felony arson. And, Evelyn, he's talking. He's not loyal. He's terrified. He says a man paid him $500 in cash to scare me with a rock. A man? Yes, he says the man who paid him, the man who gave him your address, the man who, quote, talked about the fire, was Chase Keaton. I stood up. The note, I said, the pieces clicking into place. You will regret Sunday. It wasn't a threat about what they would do to you on Sunday. Evelyn, Maris said, her voice a cold, sharp blade of triumph. It was a prophecy for them. They are the ones who regret Sunday. The game just changed. This is no longer a civil matter. It's a criminal prosecution, and we, my dear, are the star witness. The arrest of Chase Keaton was not a conclusion. It was a key, turning in a much larger, darker lock. The moment he was in custody, his entire digital life, his phone, his laptop, his cloud accounts, became evidence. And that is when the true, coordinated fraud came into focus. Maris Dalton filed for an immediate, emergency subpoena for the financial records of Frontier Holdings, Damon West's shell company. Simultaneously, the High Timber CPA auditors, now fully empowered by me as the new trust administrator, began a deep forensic dive into the Vail Trust's historical data. They weren't just looking for the big, obvious forgery. They were looking for the small, quiet, probing attacks. They found them in less than an hour. Ms. Hart, a senior auditor named Kenji, called me. His voice was calm, almost reverent, the sound of a man who had just found a perfect, textbook example of his craft. You need to see this. The probes started 6 months ago. I was at his office in minutes, looking over his screen. What am I seeing? 12 separate transactions, he said, pointing, all small, all under $500, an attempted wire transfer, a bill pay setup, a test withdrawal, all originating from an unknown IP address. He showed me the logs. The first attempt, for $100, was on May 2nd, the second, for $300, on May 10th. A pattern of small, probing attacks, like a mouse testing the walls of a trap. They were testing the system, I said, seeing what would trigger an alert. Exactly, Kenji said. But look at this. He pointed to the status column. Every single one was reversed. Every transaction was flagged by the trust's automated security and the funds were returned to the primary account, always within 48 hours. They failed, I said. They failed, he confirmed, but they left a fingerprint. He pulled up another screen. The IP addresses. We traced all 12, 8 of them. They originate from the public IP address registered to your stepbrother's place of employment, a car dealership. He wasn't even smart enough to use a VPN. I stared at the numbers. Chase had been actively trying to steal from my grandfather for at least 6 months. And the other 4? I asked. Kenji zoomed in on a map. These are more interesting. They all ping from a single, unsecured Wi-Fi network, a coffee shop, the Daily Grind in downtown Loveland. I knew the place. I also knew what was on the next block. The office building for Frontier Holdings, I said. One and the same, Kenji said. Damon West's building. Chase and Damon weren't just partners in a future plan. They were actively, concurrently, trying to crack the trust. The Keaton Collective was just the story they were going to tell after the theft. Then the subpoenaed emails landed on Maris Dalton's desk. The digital dam broke. Maris forwarded me the key file, stripped of legal jargon, with a single subject line: The Smoking Gun. It was an email chain, not between Chase and Lorraine, between Chase and Damon West. It was dated 2 weeks before the family meeting where they had pitched me the collective. Chase had written, D, she's not going for it. She's asking for spreadsheets. What do I do? Damon's reply was not a suggestion. It was an order. It was the blueprint for the entire conspiracy. Then you cut E out of the approval. We don't need her. We just need her to be quiet. Ditch the loan. We'll fund the initial phase through Frontier after we secure the asset. The asset, my grandfather's land. Chase's reply, but how? She's the auditor. She's all over the old man's books. She'll see the transfer. Damon's last message was the one that made my blood freeze. It was the entire script. You're his family. Use it. Sell her the family angle, the dream, the boutique, the bullshit. Make her the cold one who is blocking the family dream. Frame her. If she still won't play, make her toxic. We push her out publicly. We finalize the POA on the old man, and we close the deal. She can't audit what she can't see. He had written the exact script Lorraine had followed. Make her toxic. Push her out publicly. Thanksgiving had not been a spontaneous fit of rage. It had been a planned, corporate maneuver. Attached to that email, in a separate file, was the document that tied it all together. It was not a preliminary sales agreement. It was a signed, notarized consulting contract. It guaranteed Chase Keaton, personally, a finder's fee of 15% of the total sale price. But there was a condition, a single, damning condition. The fee was only payable if the final sale price of the Vail-owned land parcels to Frontier Holdings was successfully negotiated at a price point at least 40% below the established independent market value. This was not a business deal. This was a conspiracy to commit theft. They were going to steal my grandfather's land, sell it for pennies on the dollar to Damon West, and Chase was going to collect a 15% kickback for betraying his entire family. Maris, now armed with the IP addresses, the arson charge against Chase, and the email conspiracy, went back to the judge. The result was a domino chain of legal fire. First, the money trail was laid bare. Maris's team created a simple, devastating infographic, an arrow from Frontier Holdings to Apex Media, the PR firm, an arrow from Apex Media to the anonymous Romanian server that had hosted the Northern Colorado Chronicle. The payment stubs from Frontier, for $4,000 and $5,000, were dated exactly 24 hours before the slanderous articles about me had been boosted on social media. Second, the restraining orders. Based on the rock, the fire, and the trespassing at my apartment, the judge issued immediate, binding restraining orders against both Lorraine Keaton and Damon West. They were barred from coming within 500 feet of me, my apartment, my car, or my grandfather. Third, the arrests. Chase, already in custody, was denied bail. His case was immediately fast-tracked to the grand jury on charges of felony arson, criminal conspiracy to commit fraud, and intimidation, and Damon West, no longer a shadowy partner, was arrested at his downtown Loveland office. He was charged with conspiracy, wire fraud, and witness tampering. The war of shadows was over. the war of dockets and handcuffs had begun. It was in this moment, with all the dominoes falling, that I received the call. It was from Lorraine's new, very expensive, criminal defense attorney. "Ms. Hart," he said, his voice a smooth, oily baritone. "My client is devastated by these events. She believes this is all a terrible misunderstanding, a family dispute that has spiraled out of control. She is hoping, in the spirit of reconciliation, that you would be willing to sit down, to talk, as a family. A misunderstanding, after the arson, after the forgery, after the conspiracy to steal tens of millions of dollars. There is nothing to talk about, counsel," I said. "My client," he pressed on, "is willing to apologize for the Thanksgiving unpleasantness." "Unpleasantness," I repeated. The word was so small, so pathetic. "You mean the assault?" "Ms. Hart, please, she is your family. She is prepared to make amends." I thought about it. I thought about the word amends. I thought about the broken systems. "There will be no sit down," I said, "and there is no family. But if your client is serious about making amends, there is a path. It is not a negotiation, it is a restoration plan. Are you listening?" I heard him sigh. "I'm listening." "1," I said, "a full public apology, not to me, to the community, for the theft from the Loveland Winter Heating Fund. It will be printed, at her expense, in the Loveland Reporter Herald. 2, mandatory, independently verified financial and psychological counseling. For 1 full year, she will not have access to a checkbook without a cosigner. That cosigner will be an auditor from High Timber CPA. 3, restitution. She will repay, in full, every dollar stolen from the fund, and every dollar of the $131,000 she defrauded from me. I will accept a 10-year repayment plan, with interest. A single missed payment voids the deal. 4, community service, 500 hours, not at a gala, in a soup kitchen, cleaning toilets. I want a time card." That is not reconciliation, Ms. Hart. That is a sentence." "That is the ledger, counselor," I said. "That is the cost of doing business. You have 24 hours to accept. Otherwise, this conversation and this offer never happened." I hung up. The final piece was the trust. The legal battle was won, but the administrative transition had to be formalized. We met at Maris's office, me, Maris, Arthur, and the chief trustee from the bank. "It is done," the trustee said, signing the final document. "Mr. Vale, you have formally endorsed the activation of the Character Safeguard Clause. Ms. Hart, as per the trust's covenants, you are now the sole administrator of the Vale assets and properties for a term of 3 years." Arthur nodded, his face calm. He had done his part. He had placed the ring on the table. He had signed the affidavit. "Furthermore," the trustee continued, "as per the new addendum you have both signed, your administration, Ms. Hart, will be subject to a binding, quarterly, independent audit by High Timber CPA, and 25% of all net income will be irrevocably diverted to the Vale Winter Energy Fund, with the real-time public ledger. This is now law." "Thank you," I said. As we were packing our briefcases, I paused. There was one last thing, one last broken piece of the system. "Arthur," I said, "there's one more addendum I'd like to make." He raised an eyebrow. "Chase," I said, "he is what he is. He will likely go to prison, but he has a girlfriend. He might have a child. Someday." Arthur looked at me, his eyes sharp, waiting. "I am not my mother, grandfather. I am not the person who keeps the peace, but I will not be the person who visits the sins of the father onto the son, or the daughter." I looked at Maris. "I want to add a provision. I want you to draft it. A newborn trust, a subtrust. If Chase Keaton ever has a child, any child, born or adopted, I want $1 million of the Vale assets placed into an irrevocable trust for that child, to be held for their education and health, but, And this is the key. That trust will be managed, in perpetuity, by an independent, court-appointed trustee, not by me, not by you, and under penalty of law, never, ever by Lorraine Keaton or Chase himself. The money will be for the child. It will be insulated from the predators, even if the predator is their own father. Maris Dalton stared at me. Arthur was very, very still. We are protecting the innocent, I said. We are not saving the adults. We are fixing the system for the next generation. That is the only family I am interested in. Arthur Vale looked at me for a long time. Then, for the first time since this all began, he smiled. It was a real smile. Draft the addendum, Maris, he said, and send me the bill. We walked out of the office. The contracts were signed. The trusts were secured. The criminals were in custody. The only thing left was the final public accounting. The final stage, the courtroom. The Larimer County Courthouse was not built for drama. It was a place of beige carpets, fluorescent lighting, and the smell of stale coffee. It was a place for facts. The courtroom was quiet, almost sleepy, but it hummed with a low, tense energy. We were in civil court, but the gallery was packed. Pastor Dave was in the back row, looking pale. My 3 paused clients were there. So were several members of the local press, alerted by Maris. On the other side of the aisle sat Lorraine. She was not the screaming, furious woman from my doorstep. She was a performance of calculated contrition. She wore a modest, high-necked gray dress. Her hair was pulled back. She looked like a grieving widow. Her expensive criminal attorney, Mr. Harmon, sat beside her, a mountain of smug confidence. Chase and Damon West were not present. They were in a different building, a different system. Their cases now in the hands of the criminal court. Today was about the ledger, the civil accounting. The judge, a woman named Aris, was in her 60s. She had a calm, unreadable face and eyes that seemed to miss nothing. She tapped her gavel once. "We are here," she said, her voice clear and calm. "On the matter of Hart versus Keaton, I have read the preliminary filings. They are extensive. Ms. Dalton, you may begin. And please, counselor, I want the facts, not the metaphors." "Thank you, Your Honor." Maris Dalton stood. She was not an attorney. She was an architect, and she was about to build a fortress of irrefutable fact. The story here, Your Honor, is not one of family drama. It is a story of numbers on a page. It is a timeline. We will not be presenting emotions. We will be presenting receipts. She clicked a button, the large monitor on the wall, usually reserved for grainy security footage, lit up. It was not a video. It was a timeline, a single, clean line. "The bridge, Your Honor, begins here," Maris said, "with $131,524.19. That is the amount of documented, non-reciprocal, unreimbursed financial support provided by my client, Ms. Hart, to the defendants over a 5-year period." Maris walked the judge through the big-ticket items, the roof, the HVAC system, the medical debts, the 3 separate, major bailouts for Chase Keaton, with every claim, a copy of the wire transfer, the co-signed loan, the canceled check, appeared on the screen, highlighted, with a reference number. "This establishes the foundation," Maris said, "a clear, undeniable pattern of financial dependence, not family support, financial default." Then, she moved to the fraud. "Which brings us to the defendant's actions when this support," she gestured to the ledger, "was finally and professionally questioned." Mr. Harmon, Lorraine's attorney, stood up. "Objection, Your Honor. Speculation. Counsel is trying to paint my client as a—" Judge Aris held up a hand. "Mr. Harmon, sit down. Speculation is a word for emotions. I'm looking at a bank statement. Continue, Ms. Dalton." Maris nodded. "We now move from the civil debt to the criminal conspiracy." She presented the 12 probing transactions, the IP logs. The jury saw the map: 8 pings from Chase's work computer, 4 from the coffee shop next to Damon West's office. They were testing the locks, Your Honor, Maris explained. And then, when they grew impatient, they tried to kick the door in. The next slide. The attempted wire transfer. A single, failed attempt to move $75,000 from the Vail Trust to an unknown account, an account we have since traced to a shell corporation registered to Mr. Damon West. The transfer failed. The attempt, however, leaves a permanent digital footprint. She presented the email, the one from Damon. Make her toxic. Push her out publicly. This, Maris said, was the plan, not an emotional outburst, a premeditated, documented strategy to defraud Mr. Vail and disown Ms. Hart, which leads us to Thanksgiving. Objection. Harmon was on his feet again. This is a civil court. We are not here to discuss a family dinner. On the contrary, Mr. Harmon, Maris said, her voice lethally calm. We are here precisely because of the dinner. The Vail Family Trust, the document at the heart of this dispute, contains a provision, a character safeguard clause. It is a unique but legally binding covenant. The judge leaned forward, interested. A character clause? Yes, Your Honor. It states that if the beneficiary, Ms. Hart, meets 2 conditions, administrative control of the trust is transferred. Condition 1, that she has provided substantial documented support. She pointed to the $131,000 ledger. We believe we have established that. Condition 2, that she has met with a public and deliberate act of humiliation, witnessed by 5 or more parties, with the intent to disown. Maris clicked to the next file. Your Honor, the defense, in a moment of profound arrogance, filmed the activation of this clause themselves. She hit play. The courtroom filled with the sights and sounds of that night. We all saw it. Chase's shaky, gleeful phone camera. We heard Lorraine's voice, not the soft, contrite whisper in the courtroom, but the raw, shrieking rage. We heard, "Whose chair are you sitting in?" We saw the violent, open-palmed slam onto my shoulder. We saw the chair yanked backward. We heard, "This seat belongs to family." And then, we heard Chase's voice. "All in favor of banning the Ice Queen?" We saw the 8 hands go up. We saw my father's averted, silent cowardice. The courtroom was dead silent. Maris paused the video. That, Your Honor, is the assault. That is the public vote. That is the deliberate act of humiliation, witnessed by 18 people and filmed by the defendant's son. This act, on this date, at this time, legally triggered the character safeguard clause. The removal of Mr. Vail's ring, which also occurred at this time, was simply an internal signal to my client that her witness had confirmed the event. The trust's activation is ironclad. Harmon was pale. Your Honor, my client, she was emotional. She is a mother. This is not... The judge cut him off. Her voice was ice. Mr. Harmon, what I just saw was a battery. What I just heard was a conspiracy. Do you have any facts to present? Or just adjectives? Harmon sat down. He had nothing. Maris finished. Your Honor, we are asking for 3 things. First, the full, immediate repayment of the civil debt of $131,524.19, plus all statutory interest and my client's legal fees. Second, we ask the court to affirm the legal transfer of the Vail Trust administration to Ms. Hart. And third, we ask for permanent restraining orders against Lorraine Keaton and Chase Keaton, based on the documented pattern of assault, intimidation, harassment, and the ongoing criminal investigation into the arson. The judge looked at her notes. She looked at Lorraine. Does the defense have a closing statement? Harmon stood, a defeated man. Your Honor, my client, she knows she made mistakes. She was desperate. She is asking for a second chance. For the family. She is begging the court, and her daughter, for grace. Lorraine, on cue, began to weep silently into a tissue, a perfect, bloodless performance. The judge looked at me. Ms. Hart? Morris stood. Your Honor, my client does not believe in second chances. She believes in restoration. We have already, in good faith, provided opposing counsel with a path to, as he puts it, grace. The judge raised an eyebrow. You have a plan? We do. Maris slid a document across to the judge. We call it the restoration plan. It is non-negotiable. The judge read it. Her face was impassive. The court, she said, finds in favor of the plaintiff, Evelyn Hart, on all counts. She turned to Lorraine. Mrs. Keaton, this court orders you to repay the full civil debt, totaling $131,524.19, plus interest and all legal fees. The court also affirms the transfer of the Vale Trust Administration to Ms. Hart, effective immediately, for the full 3-year term, subject to the stipulated quarterly independent audits and the 25% minimum diversion to the public-facing Vale Winter Energy Fund. She picked up the next paper. The court also grants the permanent restraining orders. You will not come within 500 feet of Ms. Hart or Mr. Arthur Vale. She looked at Lorraine's weeping. As for your second chance, Mr. Harmon, the court agrees with the plaintiff. This isn't about grace, it's about accountability. This court, therefore, accepts and orders Ms. Hart's restoration plan. You, Mrs. Keaton, will submit to mandatory independent financial counseling. You will perform 500 hours of community service, as designated by the plaintiff. You will issue a full public apology for the embezzlement from the heating fund, and you will begin your 10-year repayment plan. Any violation of this order, any missed payment, any attempt to subvert this, will void this civil agreement, and I will personally recommend the district attorney pursue the full weight of the criminal charges you are so fortunate to be avoiding today. Do you understand me, Mrs. Keaton? Lorraine, her face a mask of ruined pride, could only nod, the tears now real. It was over. A quiet movement in the gallery. Arthur Vale stood up. He walked, not to me, but to the front of the court, before the judge. Your Honor, he said. Mr. Vale, the judge said, her voice softening for the first time. It is good to see you. I trust this ruling is to your satisfaction. It is, Your Honor. Arthur raised his right hand. He was wearing the ring. He had put it back on. With the entire courtroom watching, he slowly, deliberately, twisted the gold signet ring. He worked it over the knuckle. He took it off. He did not give it to me. He walked to the court clerk. For the record, he said, his voice clear, I am placing this in the court's custody, to be sealed with the file, as a symbol that the administration has changed. The key is with the new key holder. He placed the ring on the clerk's desk, a heavy gold. Final click. He had closed the circle. The judge looked at me. Ms. Hart, you have been through an ordeal. You have been assaulted, slandered, and betrayed. Your actions, your meticulous, passionless documentation, are the only reason this court was able to deliver such a swift and just accounting. Do you have anything you wish to say, for the record? I stood up. I looked at the judge. I looked at my father, who was sitting in the back row, a ghost. I looked at Lorraine, a broken, defeated woman. Yes, Your Honor, I said. My voice was clear. It did not shake. Family is not a blank check. Respect is the currency. I turned. I walked out of the courtroom. The air outside was freezing. The first snow of the season was falling. Thick, white, silent flakes, covering the gray pavement of Loveland. It felt like the world was being washed clean. A reporter, a young woman from the Real Love, Reporter Harold, ran up, a microphone in her hand. Ms. Hart, a comment. What's next? I did not stop walking. I reached into my coat pocket. I pulled out a simple, white business card. No comment, I said. I handed her the card. She looked at it. It was blank, except for a single line of text, the URL, Vale Winter Energy Fund, org. The ledger is public, I said. Let the numbers speak for themselves. I walked away, leaving them in the snow, as the data began its work. The final knots unraveled quickly. The grand jury indicted Damon West on 6 counts of felony fraud, conspiracy, and arson. His company, Frontier Holdings, was dissolved by the state, its assets seized to pay its creditors. And the fund was the final twist. Last night, as the first real cold snap of the year descended on Colorado, the Vale Winter Energy Fund, its public ledger showing a balance I had approved, made its first automated, direct block payments to the city's utility company. This morning's paper had a small story on page 3. No slander, no drama, just a fact. 60 local, low-income families would have their heating on, all winter. The noose was cut, the ledger was balanced, the knot, pulled so tight at that Thanksgiving table, was finally and completely undone. Not by passion, not by revenge, by the work, by the simple, cold, beautiful light of the audit. Thank you so much for listening to my story. I'm curious, where in the world are you tuning in from? Let me know in the comments, and let's share our thoughts. Please subscribe to Lila Revenge Stories. Like this video, and if you want to help more people hear this, support us by hitting that hype button.